Edwin Drake was a kind of a strange man to be starting a revolution. He was before the 1850s, was basically a train conductor. He already got fired in 1857. He moved his family to Titusville, Pennsylvania, a small town in western Pennsylvania, right, where he was living in a hotel. At the hotel, he happened to meet a couple of New York investors, one man named George Bessel and his business partner. You don't need to know their names. These businessmen owned a company called the Pennsylvania Rock Oil Company. They decided to go into western Pennsylvania because oil oozed out of the ground there, and they wanted to try to get that oil in order to make kerosene. The problem was that they had no idea how to get oil because nobody had ever tried to get it before. So they were looking for somebody to help them. As it turned out, they ran into Drake. Drake had no idea how to get oil either, but he needed a job, so he made something up. He told them that he was their man. They hired him on the spot and gave him a salary of $1,100 and told Drake to go out into Titusville, Pennsylvania and find some oil. Finding the oil was easy. It just kind of oozed out of the ground. Figuring out how to get the oil, though, was a mystery because nobody had ever done it before. Drake decided to do something. Here, Drake had his first innovation. He knew that nobody had ever gone after oil before, but he knew that people had gone after water before. So he just went out and hired a water well driller. Specifically, he hired somebody who had experience finding brine. That is, they dug under the ground to find salt water, which was then boiled and then refined into salt. So he found a brine driller and told him to drill for oil. Okay, they got started, got about 16 feet underground, and found out that the hole they were digging collapsed underneath it. Right? Here, Drake had his second innovation. He went out and got a length of iron pipe. And from then on, every time they dug into the ground, he stuck the iron pipe into the hole to keep the hole from collapsing. This is a major innovation in oil drilling, which is still around today. That's still how they do it. Right? This enabled his hole to go down around 32 feet. At 32 feet, he ran into solid rock. He decided to try to get through the solid rock by pumping steam into the hole and try to blow his way through the rock. This was very slow and expensive. He kept doing this for over a year and a half. People around from all over Titusville used to come out to watch him drill and laugh at him. They called the hole Drake's Folly. Even his business partners abandoned him. His company decided not to put any more money into it. He went on to all of his friends and begged for money. He got enough money to keep on going. He kept on going until 1859, when he hit. At a depth of 68.5 feet under the ground, he hit a pool of oil and was able to get out of the ground 20 barrels a day. Okay? He then took that oil, scraped over the top layers of it. The top layers were very light, fuels like gasoline. He scraped them up in a bucket and threw them into the river. He then found that there was a layer beneath it called kerosene. He then scraped that in buckets and sent that to market. He then took what was left over and threw it into the river. The kerosene turned out to make a lot of money. In New York, it sold very well. Right? And, Drake's company had struck it rich. By 1860, kerosene was selling for $19 a barrel, and everyone was happy. At which point, Drake started to run into trouble, and the industry as a whole ran into trouble. The trouble was as soon as Drake made money drilling for kerosene, everybody followed, and his brother-in-law decided to get in on the action. Thousands of competitors made their way out to Pennsylvania to drill for oil, and oil was drilled all over the place. Pretty soon, oil was being overproduced, and this is the second stage in the development of any industry, and that's overproduction in a successful business. Overproduction gives an industry three major problems. The first major problem has to do with prices, right? Because basic supply and demand, the more you produce, the lower the prices go. In the case of oil, in January 1860, you could sell a barrel of oil for $19.25, right? The following year, by January of 1862, the price of oil was down to 10 cents a barrel. That is some serious overproduction, right? A second major problem that you get with Overproduction is a decline in quality. Right? The initial producers of kerosene are people who care about the business. They're careful about what they do, so they produce quality kerosene. The Johnny-come-latelys, though, just want to make money, so they wind up producing kerosene of uneven quality. Right? And this has serious implications for the business, because after all, the business was just created to substitute from an earlier product, whale oil. If the public does not like kerosene, they can always look for another substitute. And if you make kerosene of poor quality, okay, you wind up generating the public to find another substitute. Why? Well, kerosene is created basically by scraping out the layer above kerosene and scraping kerosene up from the layer below it in oil. The layer above kerosene in oil is gasoline, which means that if you put that in a kerosene contaminated with gasoline into a lamp, it tends to blow up and kill people. The layer below kerosene in oil is diesel fuel. You put that into a lamp, you wind up asphyxiating your customers. Neither one of which is a very good situation. If you wind up having to buy kerosene and the warning label on it says warning may cause death, you probably will be looking for other substitutes. The third major problem you get with overproduction is waste. Okay? For example, this is a picture of Titusville in 1867, after dozens of oil companies have been producing there. Look at the scene. It looks like the dark side of the moon. So much oil had come out of the ground that it just contaminated the water, it contaminated the soil. It basically killed off everything. Right? And that oil that is basically lying on the ground cannot be sold. This is another picture you see here. It was from Baku in Russia, about 30, 40 years later. What they're doing with the oil here is, once they drill it out of the ground, they're just letting it lie on the ground as a lake to store it. This is extremely wasteful. Not only is this environmentally devastating, it's also financially very poor business policy. So the bottom line is, by the end of the 1860s, oil was a sick industry. People looked at oil and saw it as nothing but trouble. It was something where you could not reliably make money. It was very dirty. The quality of the products were poor. It had a very bad reputation. People involved in oil, generally were not making any money. Drake, for example, by 1863 went broke. He would wind up dying a pauper. The industry as a whole was sick, and people involved in it thought it was dying. Here, people saw a problem in oil. However, where some people see problems, others see solutions, see opportunities. And in this case, in the sick field of oil, a man named John D. Rockefeller saw an opportunity to make a huge amount of money. And how he did it, we'll pick up in the next link.